Standard 2010 Planning. The Chief Audit Executive must establish a risk-based plan to determine the priorities of the internal audit activity, consistent with the organization's goals. Interpretation. The Chief Audit Executive is responsible for developing a risk-based plan. The Chief Audit Executive takes into account the organization's risk management framework, including using risk appetite levels set by management for the different activities or parts of the organization. If the framework does not exist, the Chief Audit Executive uses his or her own judgment of risks after consideration of input from senior management and the board. The Chief Audit Executive must review and adjust the plan as necessary in response to changes in organization's business, risk, operation, program, systems, and controls.
2010A1. The internal audit activities plan of engagements must be based on a documented risk assessment undertaken at least annually. The input of senior management and the board must be considered in this process. 2010A2. The Chief Audit Executive must identify and consider the expectations of senior management, the board, and other stakeholders for internal audit opinions and other conclusions. 2010C1. The Chief Audit Executive should consider accepting proposed consulting engagements based on the engagement's potential to improve management of risk, add value, and improve the organization's operations. Accepted engagements must be included in the plan.
Practice Advisory 2010-2. Using the risk management process in internal audit planning. First, we have internal audit planning needs to make use of organizational risk management process where one has been developed. In planning an engagement, the internal auditor considers the significant risks of activity and the means by which management mitigates the risk to an acceptable level. The internal auditor uses risk assessment techniques and in determining priorities for allocating internal audit resources. Risk assessment is used, for example, auditable units and select areas for review to include in the internal audit activities plan that have the greatest risk exposure. Second, we have internal auditors may not be qualified to review every risk category and the ERM process in the organization. For example, internal audits of workplace health and safety, environmental auditing, or complex financial instruments. The Chief Audit Executive ensures that internal auditors with specialized expertise or external service providers are used appropriately. Moreover, risk management processes and systems are set up differently throughout the world. The maturity level of the organization related to risk management varies among organizations, where organizations have a centralized risk management activity. The role of this activity includes coordinating with management regarding its continuous review of the internal control structure and updating the structure according to evolving risk appetites. The risk management processes in use in different parts of the world might have different logic, structures, and terminology. Internal auditor therefore make an assessment of the organization's risk management processes and determine what parts can be used in developing the internal audit activities plan and what parts can be used for planning individual internal audit assignments. Continually, factors the internal auditor considers when developing the internal audit plan include: we have inherent risk, residual risk, mitigating controls, contingency plans, and monitoring activities and documentation. For inherent risk, are they identified and assessed? For residual risk, are they identified and assessed too? For mitigating controls, are they linked to the individual events and/or risk? And for documentation, are the risks and activities documented? In addition, the internal auditor coordinates with other assurance providers and considers planned reliance on their work. These are referred to the IIA's Practice Advisory 2050-2 Assurance Map. Lastly, the Internal Audit Charter normally requires the internal audit activity to focus on areas of high risk, including both inherent and residual risk. The internal audit activity needs to identify areas of high inherent risk, high residual risk, and the key control systems upon which the organization is most reliant. If the internal audit activity identifies areas of unacceptable residual risk, management needs to be notified so that the risk can be addressed. The internal auditor will, as a result of conducting a strategic audit planning process, be able to identify different kinds of activities to include in the internal audit activities plan, including control reviews or assurance activities, where the internal auditor reviews the adequacy and efficiency of the control systems and provides assurance that the controls are working and the risks are effectively managed.
Continuing, to ensure relevant risks are identified, the approach to risk identification is systematic and clearly documented. Documentation can range from the use of a spreadsheet in small organizations to vendor-supplied software in more sophisticated organizations. The crucial element is that the risk management framework is documented and used internally. The documentation of risk management in an organization can be at various levels below the strategic level of the risk management process. Many organizations have developed risk registers that document risk below the strategic level, providing documentation of significant risk in an area and related inherent and residual risk ratings, key controls, and mitigating factors. An alignment exercise can then be undertaken to identify more direct links between risk categories and aspects described in the risk registers and, where applicable, the items already included in the Audit Universe documented by the internal audit activity. Some organizations may identify several high or higher inherent risk areas. While this risk may warrant the internal audit activity's attention, it is not always possible to review all of them. Where the risk register shows a high or above ranking for inherent risk in a particular area, and the residual risk remains largely unchanged and no action by management or the internal audit activities plan, the Chief Audit Executive reports those areas separately to the board with details of the risk analysis and reasons for the lack of or ineffectiveness of internal control. A selection of lower risk level business unit or branch type audits need to periodically be included in the internal audit activities plan to give them coverage and confirm that their risks have not changed. Also, the internal audit activity establishes a method for prioritizing outstanding risks not yet subject to an internal audit. An internal audit activities plan will normally focus on: first, an acceptable current risk where management action is required. These would be areas with minimal key controls or mitigating factors that senior management wants audited immediately. Second, control systems on which the organization is most reliant. Areas where the differential is great between inherent risk and residual risk. Lastly, areas where the inherent risk is very high. When planning individual internal audits, the internal auditor identifies and assesses risk relevant to the area under review. Identifying potential engagements. The Audit Universe. The Audit Universe is a list of all possible audits that could be performed. The Audit Universe includes projects and initiatives related to the organization's strategic plan, and it may be organized by business units, product or service lines, processes, programs, systems or controls, or by risk category or prioritization. Ever-changing audit universe. The audit universe will change over time as management's objectives and focus change. To understand what the IAA's or internal audit activities audit universe is, the Chief Audit Executive should obtain input from senior management and the board. Sources of identifying the audit universe. Previously performed engagements, previously considered engagements, new engagements that are connected to new business lines, departments or business activities, legally or newly legally required engagements, and lastly, new engagements needed because of new technology. One of the advantages of having an audit universe is that it enables the audit activity to be clear about the extent of coverage of key risk and other risk areas each year. It can also provide a degree of rigor around areas not being audited. This means that for those audit committees and senior managers who value a degree of cyclical assurance, the audit universe could be used to inform this.
Practice Advisory 2010-1, linking the audit plan to risk and exposures. First, in developing the internal audit activities audit plan, many chief audit executives find it useful to first develop or update the audit universe. The audit universe is a list of all the possible audits that could be performed. The CAE may obtain input on the audit universe from senior management and the board. Second, the audit universe can include components from the organization's strategic plan. By incorporating components of the organization's strategic plan, the audit universe will consider and reflect the overall business objectives. Strategic plans also likely reflect the organization's attitude toward risk and a degree of difficulty to achieving plan objectives. The audit universe will normally be influenced by the result of the risk management process. The organization's strategic plan considers the environment in which the organization operates. These same environmental factors would likely impact the audit universe and assessment of relative risk. Third, the CAA prepares the internal audit activities audit plan based on the audit universe, input from senior management and the board, and an assessment of risk and exposures affecting the organization. Key audit objectives are usually to provide senior management and the board with assurance and information to help them accomplish the organization's objectives, including an assessment of the effectiveness of management risk management activities. Fourth, the audit universe and related audit plan are updated to reflect changes in management direction, objectives, emphasis, and focus. It is advisable to assess the audit universe on at least an annual basis to reflect the most current strategies and direction of the organization. In some situations, audit plans may need to be updated more frequently, example quarterly, in response to changes in the organization's business, operations, programs, systems, and controls. And the last one, audit work schedules are based on, among other factors, an assessment of risk and exposures. Prioritizing is needed to make decisions for applying resources. A variety of risk models exist to assist the CAE. Most risk models use factors such as impact, likelihood, materiality, asset liquidity, management competence, quality of and adherence to internal controls, degree of change or stability, timing and results of last audit engagement, complexity, and employee and government relations. And for now, I will be going to tackle all about using a risk management framework to prioritize engagement. So when we say risk framework, it is slightly different for each entity. In all situations, the goal is to assess the situation, identify risk, assess the risk, prioritize the risk, and establish the audit plan. There are different framework models, the COSO and ERM. ISO 31000, Risk Management Principles and Guidelines. Turnbull, Internal Control Guidance for Directors and the Combined Code. And now is the commonalities to frameworks. Risk assessment is not a one-off, once-a-year activity. It needs to be done throughout the organizations, top to bottom. It needs to look internally and externally for risk, and needs to have a mechanism for action after risks are identified.
Now we will talk about the qualitative and quantitative factors. Quantitative assessments include the dollar value of the assets at risk or potential monetary loss, while qualitative assessments include the risk of fraudulent behavior or the importance of the section to the operations of the business as a whole. Inherent risk and residual risk are basic concepts. These are also the factors affecting the internal audit planning. Inherent risk is the risk that exists before any risk management have been applied, while residual risk is the risk that remains after risk management activities have been applied. The possibility that an event will occur having an impact on the achievement of objects, the effect of uncertainty on organizational objectives measured in terms of impact and likelihood. Often, these are the main assessments that are made in respect to a specific risk. Risks and benefits. The specific amount of risks and potential benefits are also factored in. In changing circumstances, new situations or circumstances may increase the need for an engagement to be conducted in a specific area. The following is an example of how the CAE might prioritize 6 audit engagements based on the following 3 factors. First, the engagement's potential to reduce risk to the operation. Second, the potential benefit that could be achieved from the engagement. And third, changing circumstances in the operation. For the first step, the CAE assesses risk reduction potential benefits and changing circumstances for each engagement based on high, moderate, or low value.
Since we already know what is inherent risk, residual risk, and the changing circumstances, and today we're going to apply these 3 in choosing our internal audit engagements, in choosing and prioritizing the activities in the internal audit. The following is an example of how the CAE might prioritize 6 audit engagements based on the following 3 factors. First is the engagement's potential to reduce risk to the operations. Second, the potential benefit that could be achieved from the engagement. Third, changing circumstances in the operations. So the first step here is the Chief Audit Executive assess risk reduction, potential benefits, and changing circumstances for each engagement based on high, moderate, or low value. The rate here is low value is 1, moderate is 2, and high is 3.
Here is an example. Audit 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and 6. The identified risk reduction is 1. Moderate, 2. Moderate, 3. Moderate, 4. Moderate, 5. High, 6. High. Potential benefits 1. Moderate, 2. Low, 3. Moderate, 4. Moderate, 5. High, 6. High. Changing circumstances 1. Moderate, 2. Low, 3. Low, 4. High, 5. High, 6. Moderate. Here is the result. Audit 1 with the risk reduction moderate, rate of 2, potential benefits 2, changing circumstances 2, and the total of 6. Audit number 2 moderate 2, low 1, low 1, and the total of 4. Audit number 3 moderate 2, moderate 2, low 1, the total of 5.
Audit number 4, moderate 2, moderate 2, changing circumstances high 3, a total of 7. Audit number 5, risk reduction high 3, potential benefits 3, changing circumstances high 3, the total score of 9. Audit number 6, high 3, potential benefits 3, changing circumstances moderate 2, the total of 8. The highest risk is audit number 5, which is the audit priority.
Since we're done in identifying what engagement we will prioritize, today we will move to planning. Planning is where the Chief Audit Executive is responsible. He is responsible for the risk management framework. If the framework does not exist, then the Chief Audit Executive will apply his professional judgment of risk after consideration of input from senior management and the board. The Chief Audit Executive must review and adjust the plan as necessary in response to changes in the organization's business, risk, operations, programs, systems, and controls. As to the audit cycle requirements, some companies differ in the schedule of the audit activities. Some has every year, every 2 years, every 3 years. That's dependent in the risk, significance, and any other factors. And some engagements will be in the audit plan because they are in the schedule to be performed. In auditing, the board, senior management, and other executives may have specific requests for engagement. They are allowed to request for an engagement. In regulatory mandates, there are some regulations that a company faces that are essentially laws that must be followed. Environmentally, example of this is the mining companies. After they cut the trees and mine the soil, get the minerals out there, they will plant trees before they live in that certain area. That's part of the audit. And the labor safety. Labor safety means it is necessary in the construction sites. You cannot operate without safety precautions, and that is part of the requirements. Industry, banking, insurance, security in the banks. The last is the health regulations, the food and the pharmacy. We have to follow the health sanitary protocols and different laws regarding operations. I think that's all for today, and that's all for establishing the internal audit plan. Thank you.